defense all night. And if they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier, back to pass, throwing it downfield. The ball's intercepted by Jackson King. He's going to run in for a touchdown. And Mark Thaler.
Even in an all-star game, you have to limit your turnovers because especially with this talent on the field, they're going to cash in. You have to protect the football.
Well, good morning and happy September. Football season officially underway. This is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. Each and every Saturday morning, WGIR AM 610 around Manchester. We also have a Seacoast signal for you, 96.7 FM, a.k.a. 96.7 The Wave, Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler of the New Hampshire Union Leader, New Hampshire Sunday News. Mark, it's happily, officially football season.
Yeah, happy football season, Pete.
I'm excited about it. The weather is still beautiful this time of year.
Yep.
A far cry from what it will be in about 3 months or so from now in November, when we'll all be complaining about how cold it is and windy and wet.
Wearing layers outside, yeah.
Multiple layers for sure. Mark, there was some interesting action around the state, sort of those crossover games. You were at a game in Bedford last night, saw a big-time blowout. I was at a game across Route 101 in Exeter, saw myself a blowout. We're going to talk about that over the course of the next 2 hours. Great show lineup as well. Bill Ball, head coach of the defending Division I champs, the Exeter Bluehawks, will join us in about 15 minutes from now. Then John Doyle, who was at the Nashua South Spalding game last night, he'll join us from Fosters.com. And then later on, second hour of the program, none other than Brian O'Reilly of the Pinkerton Astros. But before we get into all that, let's get to the scoreboard with our friend Mark Thaler. The scoreboard brought to you by the New Hampshire Enforcement, the New Hampshire Liquor Commission, New Hampshire Liquor Commission Division of Enforcement. I'm telling you, folks, it is a mouthful. We will get it out, and we'll get it out correctly, reminding all adults that it is against the law to provide alcohol to minors. Take it away, Mr. Thaler.
All right, well, most of the games, as you mentioned, Pete, were non-league games for Week 1 last night. We'll start with the number 1 ranked Exeter Bluehawks in the power poll. Exeter knocked off Seacoast rival Dover, the number 16, 42-7. Tyler Grant with 3 touchdowns, Chris Kelly with 2 touchdowns. Number 3 Central over Timberland, 32-0. Riley Cody, the Central quarterback, outstanding Central quarterback, 239 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. Number 5 ranked Nashua South over Spalding, 35-20. This was a strange stat for this game. First half, Spalding ran 47 offensive plays to South's 11. South had a 21-14 lead at the break. So go figure for that one. Number 7, Portsmouth over Londonderry, a Division III champion over a Division I team, 22-10. Jack Mackey with the big play in the game, a pick 6. It snapped a 10-10 tie. Number 7, Bedford, the game I was at last night. Last year's Division III runner-up, now in Division II, knocked off Milford 48-7. James Caparella, outstanding quarterback for Bedford, 276 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. He only played 3 quarters, 267 of those passing yards in the first half. Keene, number 9, over Salem, number 9. They were tied for that ranking. Keene knocked off the Blue Devils 62-27. Conval over Merrimack 24-6. Manchester Memorial, this was probably the game of the night, and we figured it might be as much. Manchester Memorial over Goffstown 33-32. But the story of the game perhaps was Goffstown's quarterback, Connor Benjamin, 278 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. He also threw for 229 yards and a score. That's according to Roger Brown from the Union Leader. Nashua North over Alvin 38-7. Manchester West with a nice win over Merrimack Valley 43-19. Here's another blowout. Winnacunnet over Souhegan 41-7. And lastly, for the non-league games, Concord over Hollis Brookline 41-0. Concord quarterback Mark Gaudette 118 yards on the ground. He also threw for 86 and 2 TDs. A few more scores for you, Pete. Division 4 games. Trinity over Kingswood 49-6. Trinity ran for 293 yards as a team. And a name we talked about last week, freshman Saiku Ba with 2 TDs for the Pioneers. Hanover over John Stark 35-0. In Division 5, Stevens playing without its assistant, Aaron Roba, who died last week in that motorcycle accident. Stevens won over Monadnock 21-16. Nice win for the Cardinals. Big things expected of them. And the only game in Division 6 last night, Winnisquam over Raymond 31-8.
Yeah, a couple of good ones coming up on the schedule today. Of course, everybody talking about that Division 1, Division 2 clash. Bishop Girton at Pinkerton, 1 o'clock this afternoon. Both you and I, Mark, will be at that game. Rounding out the rest of the schedule, you got Lebanon at Plymouth, Kennett at St. Thomas, Laconia at Wyndham. That's a very interesting game. Somersworth takes on Epping Newmarket, Kearsarge at Bow, Pelham at Sanborn, and then the smaller division, Division 6, Newfound at Bishop Brady, Newport at Campbell, Farmington, Newt at Guilford, and then Franklin takes on Mascoma. Just looking at the scores from last night, stuff that stands out. You mentioned the Memorial Goffstown game. I'm surprised that Memorial won that game. It was a one-point game, so it wasn't like they dominated the game. Connor Benjamin certainly dominated the game, but Goffstown just didn't have enough around them. They lose by one. The one that really sticks out to me, not because the Keene beat Salem, but the way they beat them, 62-27. When was the last time a Keene team scored 62? You're a master researcher. I assume that maybe I just fed you a little seed for a potential topic to cover on your 1st and 10 column. Right. I don't think Keene has scored 62 that many times, especially against a team like Salem. Some other scores that stand out, not because I had a lot of interest in this game, and it's no disrespect to the game, but Conval 24, Merrimack 6. To me, that's one of the more surprising scores. Just looking at it in the New Hampshire Union Leader this morning, the way it played out.
Yeah, that's I wouldn't say surprising, but it's an interesting final score of that Conval game. That's the first game for new head coach Ryan McCartney at Conval, and he is the nephew of former University of Colorado head coach Bill McCartney. So he's doing some good things, certainly in week one for Conval there, 24-6. I think the game that stands out to me, like you mentioned, Pete, the Keene-Salem game stands out just because of the score. 62 points, that's a whale of a game, but I think more than the actual scores, and this isn't to say I'm surprised, just very impressed at the quarterback play around the state. I had said on Twitter earlier this week that this might be the year of the quarterback in New Hampshire, 2012. There are a number of talented guys, and a lot of them did some very nice things last night. So it'll be interesting to see how they do as the season plays out. Some of them are already household names. How will they be defended, moving forward once things really ramp up and you get into league play? But certainly a nice start for a number of quarterbacks throughout the state. I
like the term household names because you're right. A lot of these guys we knew about going into the year, but there's other guys who will step up, and early in the season you'll say, wow, this kid is dynamite. Where have they been hiding him? Or, man, it's just another star in the line of players out of this program. So it's interesting to watch as the new season unfold. One other score that I wanted to make mention of that I'm a little bit surprised about, the lopsided nature, Winnicott-Sauhegan. Not often do teams go into Amherst, New Hampshire, into the jungle, as they call it, at Sauhegan High School, and are able to blow out the Sabres 41-7. Now, I know Coach Bellevue was not coaching the game, was not on the sideline because of what happened during the preseason, where he was at a scrimmage and it was against the NHIAA rules, so he had to be sitting out last night's game. But I didn't expect them to lose, and I didn't expect them to lose 41-7.
I expected them to lose. I don't remember exactly what I put in the paper for my score prediction, but I did pick Winnicott to win. I think people are going to be, I wouldn't use the term surprise for Winnicott this year, but they had a down year last year. They fought through a lot of injuries, and they played a lot of young kids as a result. If healthy, I know that's a big if for a lot of teams, but they stay healthy, they get those kids back, they have that year of experience from last year. I think big things are expected of Winnicott. They're one of the four teams that I put as a playoff team in my preseason preview, so it doesn't surprise me that they won last night. That's a game they should win. I mean, I always go into these games thinking the higher division team should win, so no surprise there for me.
All right, there you go. There's our first segment in the books. We've got a great interview coming up next with Coach Bill Ball of the Exeter Bluehawks. His team gets off on the right foot as defending champs. They beat Dover last night. Seacoast rival Division I versus Division II matchup, and it was all D1 and all Exeter 42-7. We'll talk to head coach Ball as we return on the New Hampshire High School Sports Show. Also being filmed again on NHSportsPage.com. John Kesty from NH Sports Page is in the house. Our producer is Kayla Windsor. Pete Terrier, Mark Thaler will be back after these on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show with Pete Terrier and Mark Thaler on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Well, it is the New Hampshire High School Football Show each and every Saturday morning between 7 and 9 a.m. on these two fine stations and on the web, iHeartRadio.com. You can download the iHeartRadio app. You can listen live to the program wherever you are. Exeter alumni, they're all over the place, and they're happy about their defending Division I champs. Here to talk about the team, the Blue Hawks, is the head coach and athletic director at Exeter High. It is Bill Ball. Coach Ball, good morning to you.
Morning, guys. How you doing?
We're doing okay, and you gotta love being introduced as the defending Division I champs. I know you say you're moving on, and last year doesn't matter, but it still has to feel pretty good when you hear that before your name.
Oh, there's no question that it's something will stay with all of us for a long time. So it's a nice thing to hear for sure.
Coach, can you give us a little glimpse into what preseason was like for your team, what the practices were like, what the focus was like, coming back with all these expectations now that really maybe weren't there at this time last year for Exeter?
Yeah, we really pretty much, I think it's business as usual for us. We worked hard. We started early with that Dover preparation and also took a look at some other teams at different days throughout the 3.5 weeks, but it was mostly Dover prep, and this morning we begin trying to get ready for Pinkerton. So it's a huge task, and we'll have our hands full.
It was 42-7 last night at the stadium named after our guest, William Ball Stadium, Eustace Field, and Exeter ran out to a 28-0 lead. You guys, the first time you got the football, you had an interception on Dover's first series, and then you just ran it right down the field, capped off by Galen Antolino and an 18-yard touchdown run. But after that, it became the Tyler Grant show as Grant put up 3 touchdowns. Very, very nice play call. You called it, I think, a counter reverse or something where there was a handoff to James Vogt, your big fullback, and then Vogt hands it off to Tyler Grant going the other way, and you burned him not once but twice with that particular play, once from 51 yards out. That was the second touchdown, and then the second time you guys ran it in the second half in the third quarter, it worked for 38 yards. Obviously, that's now on the film for Pinkerton to look at, but can you talk about that play and what that does to the defense?
Yeah, it's a kind of crisscross play out of the wing team, and it tries to take advantage of people fast flowing to the point of attack. And first time we hit it, we hit it very well. We blocked it pretty cleanly. Second time, I thought once Grant got to the second and third levels that he just made an exceptional run. I mean, he broke about 3 or 4 tackles there. So first time I think was pretty clean. Second time I think there was a lot of effort on Tyler's part.
Coach, what have you noticed from Tyler Grant in terms of improving or upping his game? I know it's only been one game and we have a long season to go, but from what you've seen of him in the offseason and now through 1 week of actual game action, he was one of those household names from last year for the championship team. How has he improved through the offseason to this point?
Yeah, he's the same guy as he was as a freshman. He comes from a great family, tremendous work ethic. We'll get together in the weight room this morning at 9. He'll be the first one there. He plays every play like you're supposed to, like it's his last. He doesn't get shortchanged in anything in that every drill and practice. He's just he's a guy that he'll play next year at the collegiate level and do well, and he'll probably end up at a MESCAC school and have a great career, I think.
Was it important for him to start strong last night? Him specifically, because again, he did some great things for you last year. He's one of the names certainly that I think most folks would know from last year's championship team. So was it important for him to start strong, sending that message that he's ready for another big year?
Yeah, I think it was, but it's, in our offense where it's a 4-back attack, sometimes, it's going to be somebody else. That's just the way it is. And, he's prepared himself well for this 2012 season. And like I said, that second time of crisscross that he hit was a tremendous individual effort on his part.
Coach Bill Ball from Exeter is our guest. His team gets off on the right foot in 2012, beating Dover 42-7 last night in Exeter. Coach, just looking down your schedule after the Dover game last night, we already talked about Pinkerton coming up next week in Derry, but then you got Central, and then Winnicott after that. You're three real tough games right off the bat. That should give you a sense about how good this team is so far this year.
Yeah, I just tend to think about next Saturday, so I don't really look, just to be honest with you, that far ahead. It's obviously a big game for a Saturday. It's an outstanding team and program, and we just can't, it's a one day at a time mentality, and that's the truth. And just you got to play them all once. That's the way I look at it. No matter where you're playing, you have to play them sometimes. So.
Well, how about this one, Coach? I know I've already asked you about this for stuff in the paper, but I'll ask it for all of our listeners, too. Number one in the preseason power poll, statewide number one. It's a big bullseye in addition to having the bullseye being the defending Division I champion. Can we just get your thoughts for all to hear on being the number one ranked team in New Hampshire?
Yeah, like I said before, it can be a fleeting experience, so I try not to even look at it, to be honest with you, but it's, like I said, I think it's a compliment to the kids and the coaches in the program, but aside from that, it's a couple of people sitting around voting on stuff, so it really doesn't have a lot to do with what happens on Friday night or Saturday afternoon. You just got to put that stuff aside.
Coach, you were minus a couple of players last night. I know this is probably the side of coaching you least like when people ask you, why didn't Logan Laurent play last night? Why didn't Colby Swain play? But we got to ask you the question. You had told us after the game, coach's decision. Is that something that they're going to see again next week? Will they be available for Pinkerton?
It's a coach's decision, and I tend to talk about the players that play, not the ones that don't, so I'll leave it at that.
Coach, when you look at this team and the numbers you had, I looked at that Dover sideline. You guys had them outmanned basically 3-1 in uniform. You had 87 kids dressed last night for the game. Dover had 31 kids on the roster. When you look at a situation where you're winning a championship, that probably helps people want to be a part of that and more kids come out.
Yeah, it does, but I'll be honest with you, it's... We've always had great numbers. When you get used to the head coach here, we have great numbers. We have a real solid youth program in the Seahawks, and they do a great job of, they break the players into two teams, equal teams, so everybody plays, and it's more playing time for everybody, and it really enhances our program and our participation. And along with that, when we come to high school, we have a freshman, sophomore, JV, and varsity program. So there's a lot of opportunities to play football in Exeter.
On the flip side to the great numbers that Exeter has and has had for quite a while, Coach, I know Ken Osmond had said that numbers are down this year at Dover, 31 kids that he's really working with. Nonetheless, can we get a scouting report from you on Dover, just so folks can get an understanding or an idea of what Dover has this year? And in addition to that, part two of the question, what concerned you most going into this game about Dover?
Yeah, Kenny's been there a long time with Jimmy Dunn and those guys. They do a great job, and I think, he's got some really good athletes. I like the Shaughnessy kid, Wilson on defense, Washington 21 is a real aggressive guy. The quarterback, he's a run-pass threat. I think last night, and I think Kenny would agree, that they probably got worn down in the second half and playing guys both ways, especially in the trenches on a hot night. I think as the season progresses, they'll be just fine because you saw last night we had a handful early with that spread offense. They were doing a good job with accommodation routes underneath routes and slide curl stuff in the flats that we were having a hard time matching on, and they'll be fine. Trust me, they'll be in the thick of things in Division II.
That's Exeter coach Bill Ball, head coach of the defending champion Exeter Bluehawks. Coach, thanks so much for waking up early with us and joining us on the program. We will see you down the road, most likely next week out there at Pinkerton.
Great, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
Bill Ball of Exeter, his team victorious last night, Division I versus Division II matchup, 42-7 against Dover. The quarterback that Coach Ball was talking about, Derek Stegman, who is a lefty quarterback working out of the shotgun, threw some nice balls in the game, Mark. Has a bunch of different weapons. He mentioned Colin Shaughnessy. Shaughnessy scoring the only touchdown of the game for Dover, but that didn't happen until early in the fourth quarter. Made it 28-7 at the time. He's a kid that you probably heard about from last year. Kyle Seward's one of the other receivers that Dover has, can make some plays for you. Cam Rowicki, you may remember that name because he came out and kicked a field goal as a sophomore last year to knock off Spalding and win that game in overtime, if I remember it correctly. He's a kid that is being used all over the field. So Dover does have some talent. It's just a little bit strange. When you looked on the sideline and you saw Exeter and their millions, their army, and then you look across the way, especially when Dover was on the field, and then you looked at who they had on their bench.
Yep.
It's obviously going to be a struggle in terms of just having bodies and depth this year for the Green Wave.
Yeah, and again, to use the cliche, health will be a big thing for Dover. If they stay healthy, they have the frontline guys certainly to make another run. Because a number of those guys were big players for them last year. Matt Dow is a name that certainly comes to mind. Big lineman on the Union Leader All-State team last year, actually. So they have frontline guys. They have to stay healthy because if you start getting into digging deeper into that roster, if you have to deal with injuries, might be a concern. But just one game so far, so we'll see how they do.
All right, we thank Coach Ball for joining us. Our next guest coming up on the other side of this break, John Doyle from Fosters.com. Mr. Doyle watched Spalding and Nashua South play last night. You mentioned an interesting stat where South really didn't run a lot of plays in the first half, but they still led the game. You got to take advantage of the plays that you do get to run, and certainly the Nashua South Panthers did that, beat Spalding last night. Entertaining game out there in Rochester. We'll talk to John Doyle from Fosters.com when the New Hampshire High School Football Show continues on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
You found the best place for local high school football talk. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Heading up towards the top of the hour, 8 o'clock. Pete Terrier, Mark Thaler here. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. We do it each and every Saturday morning between 7 and 9 a.m. We have officially started the month of September. Where did the summer go? I want to talk to you a little bit later on, Mark, about kicking off these games this weekend on the holiday weekend. I don't like it. My vacation was cut short by a day because of it. I'm sure a lot of other people were affected by it. Yep. There were good crowds at the games that we were at. I was at Exeter Dover last night. You were at Bedford Milford. Good crowd at that game. Our next guest, John Doyle from Fosters.com. He was in Rochester at the Spalding Nashua South game. No big rivalry there between those two schools, John, but would love to get your take on the atmosphere at the field in Rochester. What kind of crowd was there? It was a game that probably not a lot. It's just not. You don't get too juiced up if you're a Spalding Red Raider fan about playing the Purple Panthers in Nashua South, do you?
Well, first of all, Pete, it's still summer until September 21st, as far as I'm concerned.
Is that the winter? Is that the winter solstice or something?
No, it was gorgeous last night. A great night to be outside, even if it, vacation was cut short a day. Labor Day weekend. What's better than being at high school football? And, the fans in Rochester, they're fired up. How could they not be? Spalding had such a great season last year. Sort of defied expectations, came within a missed field goal, making the Division II championship game. So they were excited to start the season, even if it was against a Division I opponent in Nashua. And it's an interesting game. It was 28-14 in the second half, and both teams pulled their starters. The game was not out of hand by any means, but Spalding coach Claude Gagnon made it fairly clear before the game, and then confirmed it after that he was just going to, play his starters for the first half and then one series in the second. that was going to be it. Wasn't going to risk injury for a non-conference game. So that's the game that the fans got out there, and it was a good one up until then. And then the JV game broke out. So, there you go.
So, John, just another. If you're looking for ammunition, not you specifically, but just generally speaking, if you're looking for ammunition to scrap these crossover games, this one is probably example letter A, right? Example number one.
Well, I'll tell you, Spalding obviously has its eye on the Division II playoffs, and for a Division II team, they got to make a choice going into it, and that's the choice that Spalding made. Now, you can debate the pros and cons of non-conference games all you want. If Spalding had its choice, they would have played. They either would not have played, or made sure that all 10 games counted. I guess next year we're going to a system where every game will count. I don't know, but that was quite the buzz last night. I mean, talking about non-conference games and their value. Sort of, you're right on that. It was sort of Exhibit A. If you don't like non-conference games, you probably would not have been too entertained in the second half. But on the pro side, it gave the reserves a good chance to get out there, get some game experience in a real game situation.
Yeah, just one point or question on this topic. Did you get a sense after the game from the Spalding kids anyway that were they surprised or upset, frustrated, pick your word, about the starters, the upperclassmen, about not being able to play a full four quarters on week one season opening game?
No, I think they were all right with that. I think they're all buying into what the coaching staff at Spalding wants to do. I think they 100. They had a turnout of about 100 this year, and that's there's something to be said for that up in Rochester, and it was fairly evident that they have numbers on their side. Now, how well that'll work out for them remains to be seen. But I think everybody was buying in, and it was a good first half of football, and it's just that is just the hand that they're dealt, and that is how they chose to deal with it, and I think everybody. I don't think there was any frustration specifically to answer your question that that there was it was really an exhibition game more than anything else.
John Doyle from Fosters.com is our guest, talking about that Spalding Nashua South game, 35-20. South wins it over the Red Raiders. When you talk about Spalding football, you know a lot about the Scott boys. One of them is injured right now, so they've only got Trev Scott playing. What's the expectation on when Ty Scott might be able to come back and play for this team?
From what I understand is that he's week to week. It's not going to be a season-ending injury by any means, and of course, given the nature of last night's game, there was no way he was going in. So, but Trey Scott had a fine game himself. He ran for right down here, ran for 81 yards actually, and a touchdown. So he made his debut last night and played fairly well.
So how about this? The big stat, or one of them anyway, from just a weird stat from last night's game. 47-11 in terms of plays run in the first half. Spalding with 47 of those, really dominated in terms of snaps, offensive snaps. Yet they're trailing at halftime.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The interesting stat for Nashua in the first half, bright spot for them was that they scored. They scored a touchdown on all three facets of the game. They had a touchdown return a kickoff return for a touchdown to open the game, 90 yards. And then they scored an offensive touchdown, and they had a pick six. So that's really what did Spalding in. The 20-play drive was their first offensive drive, and they did exactly what they wanted to do, move the ball fairly effectively. Now, I was assigned to also take photos for Foster's, and that drive was not good for it because most of the plays were right up the middle. And it was sort of like, when you're watching a cartoon and they're playing football and you see the hike, they hike the ball and then, a big pile of 22 players sort of just moves down the field with all this dust coming up. That was kind of like what it was because Spalding was just so methodical and running it right up the middle. It was really hard to take photos of that, that particular drive. But it was effective. The problem for Spalding, though, on the other side was that they fumbled the ball 3 times in that series. They dropped it twice, or they recovered it twice, and then the third time they actually wound up turning the ball over to Nashua, kind of killing that drive. So that was too bad for them. But yeah, very bizarre. And then I looked at my stat book at halftime and counted it all up, and 47-11. That was the way it was. So that in that regard, it was not Nashua coach Scott Knight lamented a little bit that he was not able to get as many reps in as he wanted. But Spalding, hey, boy, if they wanted to get their reps, they sure got him in that first half.
John, a couple of the other teams that you focus on for Fosters.com, the Dover Green Wave, St. Thomas. St. Thomas is in action later today against Kennett. Dover losing last night at Exeter. Was hoping that we could get your take. I know you probably haven't seen a whole lot of these teams yet with the season opener just being last night, but what is your take on those two teams as we head into the season?
Well, I'll start with Dover. I think Dover's going to be pretty good because they have some good players coming back from the team that lost in the state championship game last year. Now, I've been working with Dover coach Ken Osman for, I think this is my 5th season work directly with him and covering Dover almost exclusively. And he is the kind of guy who likes to lament over losses as far as, who plays. You always get from him, well, you can't replace the players from last year, and that's going to be our biggest challenge. And football coaches in general tend to exaggerate a little bit. So he tells me, this is the worst that he's seen. This is his 21st year at Dover. This is the worst he's ever seen as far as numbers. However, there's no reason not to believe him when he does talk. So it's going to be hard to see exactly, where Dover stands. They're going to be in trouble if any of their top players get hurt because they are fairly thin. They didn't have 100 players come out like Spalding. I think their numbers were more in the 50s, high 40s perhaps. And, last night against Exeter, number 1 team in the state, no question about that. It's really not much you can take from 42 to, was it 42 to 6?
42-7, yeah.
42-7. And, that's obviously not the way they wanted to start their season. They have another non-conference game next week and then 8 straight. So they have a chance to, try out a couple of things. They're playing a team from Mass next week, I believe. So Dover should be in decent shape. I expect them to be in the hunt. St. Thomas, again, they have their weapons coming back. They have Ryan Monette, who was one of the top rushers in the state. I think he had something like 1,400 yards last year. He's back for his senior year. He's speedy. He's, he's 5'9", so he's sort of like a Danny Woodhead thing going on there, and he can really cut through the defense. They moved up a division, though. They dominated Division 5, made it look really easy, blew out a number of teams there. So now they're in obviously a tougher division. They start with perennial power Kennett today. Very interesting to see how they do in Division 4, but I do expect that they'll do well, and they will probably make the playoffs.
Wow, all right. They might make the playoffs, huh?
I think so, yeah. I think they should be in the mix in Division 4.
That'd be good, yeah. That'd be exciting. They'd have to contend with Plymouth, Trinity, Laconia, even Wyndham, which also moved up and played St. Thomas last year in that final.
It's interesting. It's sort of like European soccer. You have the two top teams, bumping up to the quote unquote Premier League. If that's what you want to call Division 4. It's going to be tougher, no question about it. And the interesting thing about St. Thomas is, they really have to make hay in their first 7 games. They can't fall behind because I believe they end the season having to travel to Plymouth and then at Hanover for their last 2 games of the season. Not that they, obviously the games are a week apart, so it's not like they're going to be making those trips, in separate days or, one right after the other. But still, if they're in playoff trouble going into those last 2 games against 2, really very solid teams, they might be in a little trouble there. But I do expect them to get the wins that they're supposed to get. And, it's not going to be as easy as it was in D5, but I do expect them to be in the mix. So I'll be there today.
They got Trinity. Then they're at Plymouth and at Hanover. That's pretty tough. That's a pretty tough close to the season.
Oh, absolutely. So every game's a playoff game for them, which is true. This is why I kind of like the system we have now because every team plays everybody. We're going to be changing that next year. I know there are pros and cons to that system, but I sort of like the system that we have now because everybody plays everybody, and you truly do get the top 4 teams in each division. And I do expect St. Thomas. I'll be there today for their season opener to do well this season.
That's John Doyle, Fosters.com. You can check out his coverage in the paper today and online, Fosters.com. The Spalding National South game last night. And as he said, he will be at St. Thomas for St. Thomas Kennett. So look for that in the paper and online at Fosters.com tomorrow. John, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good job on this show. I really enjoy listening to it.
All right.
Thanks, John.
John Doyle. Part of our Seacoast network of people that we talk to.
We'll have to have him on again throughout the season. Yeah.
Love the quote about Ken Osborne. just never really, never really tells you, he's not. He laments these losses. That was probably the best quote of the year so far.
So far.
Ring the bell or
Put it on the
something for John
corkboard.
Doyle. We'll take a break, come back, and get you set for our second hour. A little back and forth between Mark Thaler and myself. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show on, we're on TV or on the internet. What do you call it? We're being filmed. All right, I got to figure out how to describe it. We're not really on TV. We're not on broadcast TV.
On the internet.
We're on the internet.
Yeah.
All right, it's a video cast of the radio broadcast. John Kesty from NHSportsPage.com is here. It is up on the website. You can check it out. You want to see what these two dudes on the radio look like? It ain't pretty. I don't necessarily recommend it.
Especially at 7 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah, but if you got a couple of hours to kill, it's not a bad thing. Maybe we should just spend more time focusing on our lovely producer, Kayla Windsor, instead of putting the camera on our ugly mugs. We'll talk about the games that we were at last night, kind of look around the league and look ahead to some action later on today. We got Pinkerton and we got Bishop Girton coming up. I don't think it's going to be much of a game, Mark. Brian O'Reilly from Pinkerton will join us in the second hour. Can't wait to talk to him, see if he has yet to watch that film from Exeter. Last week he said he didn't. A couple weeks ago he said he didn't. He's got to do it maybe sometime this week because they're playing Exeter.
Tomorrow or late tonight, maybe.
Yeah, probably. As soon as that Bishop Girton game is over, he'll be popping in the tape and reliving the nightmare that he suffered last year in November when Exeter knocked him off 23-13 in the D1 championship game. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR, AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Welcome back to the best local coverage of New Hampshire high school football on the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Oh, we're almost at 8 o'clock, almost done with hour number one of the program. Don't worry if you missed it. You just tuned in. You just woke up. We got another hour to go. Brian O'Reilly from Pinkerton Astros will join us. His team getting set to play Bishop Girton this afternoon in Derry. Mark and I out at the fields last night. Mark, you had an interesting matchup, a Division II matchup against a Division III team, Bedford against Milford, but the only difference here is Bedford used to be a Division III team, and they just moved up last year, and they gave a pretty good indication of why they moved up because they just ran all over Milford 48-7 at Bedford High School. You think that this is where they belong in Division II? Is that the trend? And ultimately, will they? With the way the format is set up, it all changes next year.
Yeah.
But they're probably placed in the right spot at least for this year.
No question. They, I think Kurt Hines told me, head coach Kurt Hines told me in the preseason, 114 kids came out for the Bedford football program this preseason. They certainly have the numbers. Milford's head coach Keith Jones said as much last night when I was chatting with him that they'll do just fine in Division II because they have the numbers to do it. They have a lot of talent. Look, I've talked to coaches from a number of Bedford's different sports and coaches that play Bedford in a number of different sports, I should say. And this is a soon-to-be Division I program, in a number of sports. Lacrosse as well. They're very good. State champs in lacrosse. The football team certainly on the rise. A contender now, it seems, each year. They're in the right spot for now and going to Division I next year under this new format. So, yeah, Division III was not their place anymore. I mean, it was evident last night. Milford's a perennial contender in Division III. I still do expect them to do fine this season in Division III. But you could see the difference in terms of the talent level and just the number of kids that Bedford could draw upon. 48-7 is quite a statement.
When you look at that Bedford team, and coming into the year, everybody knew about James Caparel. He was a quarterback who we've seen now for 2 years prior to this season leading that team. He's a senior this year. He just looks like a quarterback. He looks like a football player, but especially a quarterback. What can you say about his game? He can throw the football. He's more of a passing quarterback than he is a running quarterback. A lot of these guys, Connor Benjamin, he's got the ability to, I would say he's more of a running quarterback than he is a passing quarterback. But you look at Caparel, and he just looks like a classic drop-back type of passer.
Yeah, and he did a lot of that last night. He was very poised in the pocket, as he's been in the last couple of years when I've seen him. Very poised in the pocket last night. I was also impressed with what he was able to do on the run, getting outside the pocket. When things broke down, he was able to still stay composed, scan the field, make his reads. He went long. He really used all three phases of the passing game. He went long at times. He went underneath those intermediate routes, and he also checked down to Dylan York coming out of the backfield. So he was very good at scanning the field and making the right decision, and that's something that he definitely needs to do this year because the offensive line is completely inexperienced. They lost big Will McInerney, their big left tackle, who has already received 4 college scholarships. He's gone for the season, has to have surgery, or did have surgery on both of his knees, so he's out, and that's a big blow for Bedford because he was the experienced guy in that line. Bedford played all new guys on the offensive line last night, and it's still a work in progress. The two guys that got the most snaps were on the left side and the right side, the tackles. They changed things a lot, or at times on the interior portion of the line, still trying a lot of kids out. So the question coming into the game was James Capperell going to be able to do what he can do? Because you didn't know if he was going to have the time to make those plays. Everything worked out last night. It'll be interesting now to see how things shake out in Division II. The speed of the game is quicker. Kids are sometimes bigger. How will the offensive line fare? Will they still be able to give Capperell the time he needs to make those decisions correctly that he did last night? So that's something to watch moving forward.
All right, how did you have Bedford shaking out in your Division II playoff picture? Do you have them in the playoffs?
Yeah, my 4 playoff teams for Division II: Bishop Girton, Bedford, Winnicott, and Keene.
You're looking pretty good today. I mean, BG yet to play. They play Pinkerton. Probably going to lose that game. But out of the 3 other teams you mentioned, they all looked pretty good last night.
Yeah, and it'll be an interesting division because if you just go by last year, that means that outside of Bishop Girton, which won the championship, the other 3 playoff teams from last year don't make the playoffs. Under my predictions, for what they're worth. And I think Winnicott's going to have a bounce back year. I remember talking to Joe Batista from Merrimack, their head coach in the preseason. He was saying, when the MO for Winnicott is when they have a down year, they bounce back strong to make another run. I expect that this year, and they looked very good last night. But I wasn't there obviously, but just based on the score against Sauhegan, so Winnicott looked good. And I think the real team to watch this year in Division II is Keene. They've been kind of knocking on the door the last couple of years. They made the playoffs in some of those years, and then last year they didn't make the playoffs. They've kind of been a little inconsistent. But this might be the year where they can break through. So they're one to watch. But again, my 4 playoff teams: BG, Bedford, Keene, and Winnicott.
And Keene, the team that has given BG the problems the most out of any other team in that division in recent years.
Yep.
Although, like you said, last year it just didn't work out for them.
Right. In terms of making it to the playoffs, right. Yep.
We got another great hour to go. Brian O'Reilly from Pinkerton will join us. We'll see if he has watched that tape. Has he watched the tape of Exeter and Pinkerton? There, to me, Pinkerton's very impressive, Mark. I saw them at the Queen City Jamboree, as you did. They just look like a heck of a football team. I saw Exeter play a full game last night. I still think Pinkerton is the cream of the crop, but we all thought that last year going into that championship game. And Exeter was able to win that game and really control that game and dictate the game the way they wanted to. I can't wait to see BG and Pinkerton in action, although I think it's going to be a big-time blowout. I think Pinkerton's going to win that game big.
Yeah, I think Pinkerton will win big, too. The other thing the big note that I took out of doing the Division II preview was that coaches, they're still picking BG as the favorite, but the gap is, as I wrote, next to nothing, which hasn't been the case for, 7 or 8 years running now. So I think BG's coming back down to earth. We'll see what they have today against one of the top teams in the state.
Hour number 2, New Hampshire High School Football Show, coming up on the other side at 8 o'clock.
Football show.
What in the wide world of sports is going on here?
The New Hampshire High School Football Show is brought to you by New Hampshire State Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement.
I don't want them to gain another yard. You blitz all night. If they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier.
Back to pass, throwing it downfield. And the ball's intercepted by Jackson King. He's going to run in for a touchdown.
And Mark Thaler.
Even in an all-star game, you have to limit your turnovers because especially with this talent on the field, they're going to cash in. You have to protect the football.
Well, welcome back. It is another hour of the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 in the Manchester area. You can also get us in crystal clear FM 96.7 The Wave, Seacoast area of New Hampshire. Pete Terrier, Mark Thaler, your hosts each and every Saturday, 7 to 9. Mark, another good hour in the books from the first hour, another great hour to come. Brian O'Reilly, the Pinkerton Astros head coach, he will join us. His team getting set to take on Bishop Girton this afternoon in Derry. Before we get to that, why don't we run down that Friday night scoreboard? And it's brought to you by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement and the Buyers Beware program, reminding all adults that it is against the law to provide alcohol to minors.
Yeah, most games last night, Pete, were non-league games, so we will give that rundown first, and we'll start with the teams ranked in the Union Leader WGIR WMUR Power Poll, the statewide top 10. Number 1, Exeter, with a 42-7 win over number 6, Dover. Tyler Grant, 3 touchdowns, and Chris Kelly with 2 scores for the Blue Hawks. Number 3, Manchester Central, 32-0 winners over Timberlane. Riley Cody, outstanding QB for Central, 239 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. Number 5, Nashua South with a 35-20 win over Spalding. In the first half, Spalding had 47 offensive plays to South's 11, but Nashua South led at the break 21-14. Number 7, Portsmouth, defending Division III champion, a 22-10 win over Division I Londonderry. Jack Mackey with a pick 6 interception snapped a 10-10 tie, and the Clippers went on to win from there. Number 7, Bedford, they're tied with Portsmouth for that ranking with a 48-7 win over Milford. James Caparel, 276 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. He had all 4 TDs and 267 of those yards in the first half. He only played 3 quarters in that game. Keene and Salem both tied for the number 9 ranking. Keene won the game 62-27. Conval with a 24-6 win over Merrimack. And the game of the night, possibly, Manchester Memorial from Division I with a 33-32 win over Division III Goffstown. But the big story, Goffstown's quarterback, big Connor Benjamin, 278 yards with 3 touchdown runs. He also had 229 yards through the air and a touchdown. So he really did everything for the Grizzlies last night, but still Manchester Memorial with a 1-point win. Nashua North, 38. Alverin 7. Manchester West with a nice win over Merrimack Valley, 43-19. Winnicunnet beat Sauhegan 41-7, and to round out the non-league games, Concord with a 41-0 win over Hull's Brookline. A couple other games to report. Division 4 games. Trinity, the defending Division 4 champion, 49-6 win over Kingswood. Saiku Ba, freshman for the Pioneers, had 2 touchdowns. As a team, the Pioneers ran for 293 yards. Hanover with a 35-0 win over John Stark. In Division 5, Stevens with a 21-16 win over Monadnock. And last game of the night, Division 6, Winnisquam 31, Raymond 8.
The schedule today has a couple of real interesting games, in my opinion. The most interesting, of course, Bishop Girton at Pinkerton. That game kicks off at 1 o'clock. Division 4 contest. There's 3 of them. Lebanon at Plymouth, Kennett at St. Thomas, Laconia at Wyndham. Wyndham entering Division 4. That should be very, very interesting, as will the St. Thomas-Kennett game. St. Thomas also going up to Division 4. In Division 5, Somersworth, Epping, Newmarket, Kearsarge at Bow, Pelham at Sanborn. Division 6, you got Newfound taking on Bishop Brady, Newport at Campbell, Farmington, Newt at Guilford, Franklin at Mascoma. The Friday night scoreboard and the Saturday schedule brought to you by New Hampshire Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement and that Buyers Beware program. Hey, adults, even though it's Labor Day weekend, even though it's like really the last party weekend of the summer, it's against the law to provide alcohol to minors. Do not do it. Mark, when you look at some of the action from last night, one of the games that we haven't really talked a whole heck of a lot about is that Londonderry-Portsmouth game. I like the Division I, Division III matchup where you got a team in Portsmouth that is pretty much cream of the crop, defending champs, one of the favorites in D3 going into the year, playing against one of those lower Division I teams. And you wonder what will happen when these two teams meet up. Londonderry loses to Portsmouth last night, 22-10. Portsmouth really taking control of that game in the second half. After the game, I'm reading a story, rallynorth.net, where John Rich, the Londonderry coach, says, hey, they could compete in Division I. I like these type of matchups, especially when the lower division team steps up and says, hey, we can play against some of these guys. Maybe we're not going out there and competing against Pinkerton, but give us a Londonderry, give us a Manchester Memorial, one of those type of teams, and we can really hold our own.
Yeah, Portsmouth is certainly one of those teams that can do that. I don't know if they could really do it on a weekly basis, going up against the teams in Division I, but they're certainly on at the top of that list in terms of a team that could hang for a couple of games anyway. They gave Central all they could handle last year in that season opener. Central survived a scare. Portsmouth's not the Division III champion for nothing, and they won it as the 4 seed last year, if you remember, and that was kind of a fluky thing because they were much better than a 4 seed. It's just that league was so competitive that based on wins and losses, who won, the matchup results, that they ended up dropping to the 4 seed. But it didn't matter because they still went on the road and won 2 games, including one at Bedford. So, they have kids that have come through that program, and they will continue to bring kids to that program that can compete. So, not a surprise that they won. I did pick Londonderry in that game, but I don't think that's a shock to anybody who has read my stuff or listened to us on the air, and I'd go with the higher division teams, but it's not a surprise that they won.
One thing that is also not a surprise, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is at Portsmouth. Each of the last 5 years, they've had a different starting quarterback. They've made the championship game in the 4 previous years. Last night, it was Donovan Feiner, the quarterback. Hope I'm saying his name right. If not, feel free to give us a call, 645-6161, and let us know how to correctly pronounce these kids' names. We really want to do it the right way, folks. Donovan Feiner, 17 for 29, 273 yards in the air and a touchdown. It's just amazing to me how they can just continually plug another kid in, and he wasn't even supposed to be their starting quarterback. It was supposed to be Travis McDonald, but he suffered a broken clavicle, which is basically your collarbone, I believe it is, and they plug in Feiner, and what do you know? He puts up almost 300 yards passing.
Must be something with those kids being able to throw a football and a baseball. We know Portsmouth is big in baseball as well, so those kids can. It seems like a lot of those kids just have rocket arms. So, again, no surprise that they have another quarterback in the pipeline.
We talked a little bit about this game in the first hour, but the score that really stood out to me of all the scores last night, Keene 62, Salem 27. Now, seeing Salem last week in the Queen City Jamboree, I didn't really know any of the players, by looking at the roster. Not many guys are returning from that team. Looks like Jack Gaddy may have chosen the right time to retire, knowing what he had left on the cupboard, and decided to step down. Adam Gagney comes in, a coach that comes out of the state of Massachusetts, and he's got his work cut out for him in Division I. They got spanked last night in Keene. It's not a tough, it's not an easy road trip to make, Salem to Keene or anywhere to Keene for that matter, but when you lose 62-27, that's got to be a little bit of a wake-up call that, this is going to be a real tough year in Salem.
Yeah, and also, again, I'm kind of high on Keene at this point, again, understanding it's very early, but here, a couple of things about Keene for folks to know. They had 25 juniors on the team, and John Lupa told me in the preseason that he estimated 16 of them earned their varsity letter last year as sophomores. So he has experience coming back and still with another year to play. Now, a couple of names to note, some of their playmakers, because they are really loaded at the skill positions. The coach's son is the third-year starting quarterback, Lucas Lupa. They have a split end, Matt Del Vecchio, who's a senior. Tom Galanis is a junior at tailback. Alex Austin, senior tight end. They have guys that Lupa can throw to, and they also have guys that can hand the ball to. Alex Parento is the big fullback. He's a junior, third-year starter now. So they have weapons. And actually, unlike years past where Keene has been a little inconsistent, they've had some bigger teams in the past. This year's team is a little bit smaller and quicker. And I liken it, not having seen Keene, but just based on what I've been told both from Lupa and other coaches, it sounds like they are smaller but quicker, and that's been kind of the hallmark or the signature of Bishop Girton teams in the past couple of years. They haven't been the biggest teams, and if you've gone to any of those games, it's pretty clear that the kids aren't big at Bishop Girton or haven't been in the past, but they've been quick. And Keene, it seems like, is on that road this year and off to a great start with a 62-point season opening performance. So those are a couple of names to note for folks that aren't following Keene too closely, and maybe a couple of reasons why they are considered contenders this year.
We'll get to a break, come back. We got Pinkerton head coach Brian O'Reilly joining us on the program. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. You can see us on the web, nhsportspage.com. John Kesty, the cameraman from nhsportspage.com, in the house. He is filming the show as he does each and every Saturday morning. You can also catch us on two fine radio stations across the state of New Hampshire, WGIR AM 610, Manchester, Nashua, Concord area, and then you head out on Route 101 east towards the beach, maybe heading there for Labor Day weekend festivities. Tune us in, 96.7 The Wave. Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler. We'll be back quickly after these.
These guys know their high school football. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show with Pete Terrier and Mark Thaler on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Well, another guy who certainly knows his high school football is Pinkerton head coach Brian O'Reilly. Coach O'Reilly joining us on the program. Good morning, Brian.
Morning, Pete.
Hey, have you been waiting for this day to come when you can actually go on and strap it on and take on somebody else besides your own team?
I mean, a couple less waitings than that, but yeah, everybody wants to get started for the season. Practice gets to be a little tedious, so it's time to go.
Coach, can you just share with us another season opening matchup with BG? Just your thoughts on doing it. A few years back, it was kind of a new thing, and a lot of folks were certainly really excited to see it. I imagine there's still plenty of people excited to see today's game, but maybe just how things have changed over these last few years where the two teams are playing each other regularly.
That's the thing that's changed. It's because it's such a regular thing now. There's nothing unique about it. The only thing that stays the same is the games don't count towards the playoff drive. We're still in opposite divisions, but that will fix itself next year.
And, Coach, you've said in the past that you really don't like those games. I mean, you take the opportunity to play a team like Brockton, Massachusetts every single year because you think it's good for your program. You like to see how you guys can fare against some top competition from out of state. But you look at some of these other situations where these teams don't go at it full bore and figure, why bother even playing these type of games when they don't count?
Yeah, I don't know that it applied to the first week of the season. I don't know that it ever applied to this game. My discussion with you in the past was open weeks in the middle of the season where teams just scheduled someone for the sake of scheduling someone, and then they went through the motions of a game. And I remember a couple of years ago in one of the papers, coaches even complaining the game meant nothing, even though they were the ones, or their schools were the ones that scheduled it. I always had a problem with that. If you're going to schedule someone that has meaning to you, that you want something out of it. This week's games that was set by the NHI several years ago was a crossover of 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, so it had a little bit different flavor to it. I had problems with that game for different reasons. It had nothing to do with the competitive edge or something. It just had to do with it was a big game right at the beginning of the season, yet ultimately had nothing towards the playoffs in the end. So it was in its own category. The point is moot now because it's fixed for next year, so we're good.
So how do you approach or look at today's game against Bishop Girton?
Well,
Understanding everything you just said.
Yeah, well, we're a little different situation this year because of the fact that we graduated 26 seniors, most of whom started or were the immediate backups for us last year. We need some time to, as coaches, to make sure that we've got the right people in the right positions. So I'm good for any game I can get my hands on right now. So my point here is we're not holding anything back. We're not going to wait till next week when the game really counts. We've got a lot of questions in our own minds to make sure we're where we are. We've lost a lot of people, so we need to get into it right now.
Not a lot of teams can replace 26 guys who are significant contributors, but certainly the Pinkerton Astros football program is one that can move on and can survive graduations. And you don't want to see too many injuries, things like that happen, but they do happen when you've got some depth on the roster and you've got some returning guys who you know you can count on. We talked about this last week out at the Queen City Jamboree at Gill. Everybody thinking, hey, Pinkerton's bringing back their 2-year starting quarterback, Chris St. Ange. We see him in the Jamboree. He's in the backfield, but he's not handing off the football to other people. He's getting it handed to him. I want you to talk, if you can, about that transition where you put Sean Conroy as your starting quarterback and you're moving Chris St. Ange into the backfield as a running back.
Well, that was to maximize our effectiveness on offense. First of all, don't don't think that Chris won't be a quarterback at some point. Don't be shocked when you see it. Chris is still a quarterback. He's been a quarterback for 2 years, and we didn't move him from the quarterback position because there was some sort of an issue. We moved him because he's a tremendous runner, and we wanted to maximize for our team, losing Emmett, losing Kevin, among other people. We needed somebody back there. We're very happy with Manny, by the way, but we like to have somebody else back there that teams couldn't exactly key on just one. And Sean was always an excellent quarterback. Sean was, as happens every year in high school football, was one of those kids who was in the same class as somebody else in some other position on some other team. You know, you're a great split end, but you got a split end in front of you, and you spend your whole career being the backup to the guy who is just a little bit better than you. Well, it made no sense to us. We needed that extra running back, and we're not losing a thing with Sean at quarterback. And we're gaining things in other areas. They're different kind of quarterbacks, but there's a lot of similarities. We're not taking any hit at the quarterback position at all, and we've upgraded our running back position tremendously. And Chris, being a captain, being a good teammate, we talked about this way back at the end of last season. He was on board with this and understood exactly what we're doing. So that's where we stand with that.
Coach, can you just speak to Sean's leadership ability? That's not to say that Chris doesn't have it. I've had the chance to talk to Sean in lacrosse season. He's one of your big guys for lacrosse on defense, and I know Pinkerton in all of, certainly lacrosse and football, defense is huge. So just that your comments or your thoughts on Sean as a leader for this team.
I'll talk about Sean as a leader by telling you this. Going back to that situation, Chris is a captain of the football team, Chris St. Ange. Sean Conroy is a captain of the football team. The players understand that both of them are leaders. That's my point about how they were both stuck in the same position, and it was to our benefit to move one. Those are both captains of our team, and the players love Chris, and they love Sean. They just, they'll do what they need to do. Sean, as you said, is a big-time player for us in the spring, but understand that last year, while Sean wasn't playing in the offense, he was our starting safety. So Sean's always been a player for us in football and lacrosse. And like I said, nothing bad has come out of this move for us. This is all positive.
Brian O'Reilly from Pinkerton is our guest on the New Hampshire High School Football Show. You can hear us each and every Saturday morning between 7 and 9 a.m. WGIR AM 610 in the Manchester area. Also 96.7 FM WQSO The Wave. And Brian, you mentioned Manny and that you're very happy with him. Manny Lattimore is a kid that burst onto the scene, so to speak, as a freshman a couple of years ago. He really had a bunch of guys in front of him that you had to get the football to. This is his opportunity to kind of break out. People know about the kid, but it's more of a chance to people see him carry the football more. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. It's the same situation that Emmett went through. Emmett played as a sophomore, but nobody really paid that much attention to Emmett. And then junior year was Emmett's coming out party. And Emmett put together 2 years, back-to-back 1,000 yards, and won a championship and led us to the championship game. And so we're in 2 championship games those 2 years. Manny's in the same situation. He's now a junior, ready to play. I've said for years in sports, but football in particular, because of the physicality, you can't win with sophomores across the board. You have to have juniors and seniors. You'll get random sophomores in there that can certainly help you win, but if you have to rely on a bunch of sophomores, they're not mature enough usually to help you accomplish that goal. But once a kid hits his junior year, the maturity level kicks in, and I see it all the time. They become a totally different player. If they're an okay player, they become a pretty good player. If they're already a good player from sophomore year, they start to move into being a great high school player, and that's what we expect this year.
What do you expect from your linebackers, in particular Matt St. Ange and Matt Madden? Those are the strength of your defense, right?
I expect them not to get hurt this year because the two of them we rely on. Our entire defense is built around the two Matts. We're pretty happy with what we've got in there. The only thing I could make it better is if they were both juniors instead of one being a senior, but we'll be okay for a year. They're as good a linebacking tandem as we've had in our program. just because the two of them work so well together, and both of them are ferocious hitters. And, we all know this as coaches. Occasionally, you have no choice. Sometimes you're playing kids at linebacker who will hit kids when they have the opportunity, but somehow they just don't manage to seek out and destroy players. They just react to what goes on. I've always thought for years you really can't coach kids into being linebackers. It's a natural position. When you get those kind of kids, from the day they get there, they're ready to go, and you've got what you need at linebacker. That's what everybody wants as a linebacker. We've got two of them.
Coach, I'm going to ask you, if you will, to play along with us and look past Bishop Girton, just for radio purposes.
Only for radio purposes, although I did watch them last night.
Oh, you did watch the film.
Of course
okay.
I did. Everybody scouts the week before they play someone.
The mystery has been unveiled. Well, let's talk about Exeter. Is the part of your preparation getting your kids that were involved last year, and obviously all your kids know about the fact that you lost in the championship game to Exeter last year, is that part of the preparation to get these kids to not worry about that?
No, we've never even took me at my word here, because it's the truth. We haven't even mentioned the word Exeter yet this season to anybody on our team. So, no, absolutely not. And until last night, and it's normal, the week before you play someone, you have to go and scout. Until last night, I didn't even pay attention to what Exeter's been doing. And I know Billy does the same thing for us. You can't do that. Last year was last year. We're just the only reason you're asking me about it on the radio. I'll talk about it now. We're not looking past Bishop Girton until this game is over today. Then we'll get ready for Exeter. But they, according to the polls, according to yours, according to Mark's, it's supposed to be them and us. So we will certainly do whatever we have to do next week. But you earlier said that not all programs can lose 26 seniors and move on. Well, I think he lost 20 seniors. I watched him last night, moving on pretty well. So we'll see what happens. But I can't worry about that until late this afternoon.
Coach, I got to talk to Travis Cody for the Story in Friday's paper, Friday's Union Leader, and we were just revisiting the 2007 regular season game. Again, I'll ask you to play along. I'd like to get your thoughts on that game. Back then, Travis Cody was coaching Manchester West. They took a 14-0 lead on really two impressive drives to start the game. They were driving in on that third drive for a potential third touchdown, and then the tide changed. You had one of your signature Pinkerton goal line stands, and then things went the other way. Pinkerton wins 16-14. That's really the long and short of it. But just what you remember from that game in particular, where it really seemed like Travis Cody had you guys on the ropes, and he was looking like he might get that first win ever against Pinkerton.
As I remember that game, it was really one of the first times that we had come across the triple option. Very few teams will run the triple option where they'll actually read the defensive tackles or the defensive ends, mainly because in high school football you can't cut block down the field with receivers, so it's not necessarily the offense that you used to watch Nebraska or Oklahoma run, where once you got to the corner you sliced down a defensive back and the back was gone. Because you really can't do that in high school football, most schools won't run. I don't want to get too technical here, but they won't run the triple option. And so it's something that we really weren't that comfortable with defensively, and we put a cursory defense in like we do for everyone else. They did a great job of reading our tackles that day, running inside option, running the outside veer, reading our defensive ends, and their quarterback, if I remember, their fullback was killing us. And they were just going down the field in large chunks. And honestly, I don't know the play selection down on the goal line, but either our kids toughened up on that or they went to basic plays. But we made some adjustments on the fly, and they were okay to stop the bleeding, and then we had pretty good offense. We did play them later that year, if I remember right, in the first round of the playoffs, and we understood the triple option, and we took care of it in that day. But that was a good lesson, and it applies to today's game. Travis today running the midline option, and others, we've worked on it all week, and our players understand. You're not going to be blocked, and when you're not blocked, don't think like, whoa, what did I do? No, you're not being blocked for a reason, so you need to do this, and we'll see how that goes today.
35 years as the head coach of Pinkerton, and he can still remember stuff like that from 5 years ago. Coach, we really appreciate it. We could have you on for the whole entire show, but I know you got a game to get ready for. BG coming in 1 o'clock this afternoon is the kickoff. We'll see you out there after the game.
All right, thanks, Pete.
Brian O'Reilly, head coach of the Astros. It is amazing how these coaches, because when you asked Travis Cody that same question basically last week, I should say, he remembered everything. And then O'Reilly, who's been doing this forever, is able to pretty much rattle off the play-by-play of what happened.
It's a fun thing to do during the week as you're writing stuff for the end of the week. I typically hammer some of these guys. Travis Cody will tell you I hammer him about how close he came to winning that game against Pinkerton. They needed 5 yards. They had 4 downs to get it, and if they get it, they're probably up 21-0, and it's most likely lights out. He remembers that game, and he wants this one bad today. So it's a fun back and forth with the coaches that I know well to be able to hammer them on some of the stuff that might be sore topics to discuss.
Well, let's take a time out. We'll come back, and we got right up till 9 o'clock this morning. We can even open up the phone lines. You want to talk high school football on this, the opening weekend of the season. Easy number to remember, 645-6161. That's 645-6161. You can talk with myself and Mark Thaler from the New Hampshire Union Leader. And we can talk a little power poll and see what we learned from last night and who's moving out and who might be moving into the power poll as we continue the New Hampshire High School Football Show. WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
These guys know their high school football. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show with Pete Terrier and Mark Thaler on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
We're really not trying to brag here with all these kind statements as we come back and talk about how we know our high school football. We really enjoy it. We do know our high school football, but look, it's fun for us, and it makes it real easy to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday after being up till 1 o'clock in the morning doing all your stuff for the paper, Mark, and your outstanding website, NewHampshireGameDay.com. Me doing my work on NHSportsPage.com. It's just a lot of fun, and as much as I complained about my Labor Day weekend getting messed up and my vacation getting cut short because I had to come back and cover football, I don't mind it so much, especially getting into the show and talking to guys like Coach O'Reilly, talking to guys like Bill Ball, talking to guys like John Doyle. It's just a lot of fun, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
I don't have much to add. That was well said. I agree with you completely.
All right, we did open up the phone lines if people want to dial in and talk some high school football, and that number once again 645-6161. We got kind of an open segment here where Mark and I will kind of discuss things and talk about the way we see things in New Hampshire high school football. But you are welcome, 645-6161, and we do have a caller on the line. Steve from Merrimack joins us on the program. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Peter. How you doing?
Good. Hey, how's it going, buddy?
I'm okay. How's the wife and family?
Doing very well. Growing up.
I'm glad to hear that. I changed vocations about a year ago. I drive a school bus at Merrimack now. Mm-hmm. And I did the Merrimack Conval game last night.
Well, and that game, was that at Merrimack or was that at Conval? Because
it was at Conval, and I didn't drive the team. I drove the cheerleaders, but that's besides the point. The final score was 24-6, and it wasn't that close. Conval's got a really good team, and they've got this kid. I don't know his name, number 7. This kid kicked a 45-yard field goal. He put 2 kickoffs into the end zone, and punt. This kid is an all-around great player. He plays offense and defense also.
So Conval is a team to beat in Division 3. And
they're Division 3, Merrimack is Division 2. But I wish I should have found out the kid's name. But this kid's got all the tools. He's not big, but I was very impressed by him. But Merrimack made a lot of mistakes. They had a 3rd and goal with about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they were down 17-6, and they couldn't push it over. And there was one call a ref could have made on Pearson to find face guarding, but other than that, they're poorly, very poor.
Yeah, the real question for you, Steve, is driving a bus full of cheerleaders. Is it louder on the way to the game or on the way home? That's what I really want to know.
I drove from Peterborough to Merrimack at initially 9:30, I guess, around there. These girls didn't stop talking from the time they got in the bus to the time they got off the bus. Okay. But, you have to admire the passion. They love what they're doing, these kids. I was supposed to do the football team, but two other people got that at last minute. They forgot to get the Spirit Squad bus.
Hey, I'm sure you said I'll volunteer for that one. I'll drive a bus full of cheerleaders. I don't even have a commercial license. Steve,
no, that's funny, Peter.
Great to talk to you, and we appreciate the phone call.
Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, that's Steve from Merrimack, a familiar voice from my past.
Yeah, he's asking you about the family, the wife and kids. That's good stuff.
We do have some open phone lines if you want to dial in, 645-6161. That's 645-6161. Perhaps you were at a game last night and you saw something you want to talk about. The game today, BG and Pinkerton, we were just talking about the injury at quarterback to Pat Bilodeau, the starting quarterback for Bishop Girton. But I saw the team play last week against Salem, and I actually thought the Hurley kid, the lefty, was a better passer than Pat Bilodeau was for Bishop Girton. I don't know what your opinion is.
Well, actually, I didn't see a ton of that last game because I was at the Jamboree but working on a different assignment. I was still working on follow-up from the videotaping.
Videogate,
the video violation.
High school football style.
So I wasn't watching the play-by-play, but sounds like they have BG has two capable quarterbacks. I know Bilodeau is hurt right now with the thumb injury, but it'll just be interesting to see how Bishop Girton does today. In year two of the Cody era there. It sounds like they're going a little bit more to some wing tee stuff. I know they were still doing a lot of stuff based on personnel last year that I think Tony would have done, Tony Johnson. So I think this is clearly more, certainly Travis Cody's team now, and I think that wing tee thumbprint will be on the Cardinals even more so, on the offense.
All right, we got a caller from the Seacoast. We got Justin out there in Rochester. He's going to join us. Justin, good morning.
Peter, Mark, what's going on? This is Justin McConaughey. You know who this is.
Oh, Justin, how's it going, buddy?
What's up, bro?
How was your first football Friday night of the season?
Oh, it was an excellent night for a game. A little hot. I mean, I wasn't in Pats, thank God, because I'm a big wuss. But probably a little hot to be playing. But good night to be at the game.
Now, were you at the Dover game? What game were you? Oh, were you at Spalding?
Yeah, Spalding versus South, and. I kind of tweeted this out last night. Spalding really dominated in the first half. They just kept shooting themselves in the foot. And you guys, I listened when I got up. You guys do a heck of a job, by the way. You guys mentioned a 20-yard drive, or 20-play drive to start the first quarter, and just fumbled on the South 15. It was that kind of night for Spalding, but overall, I was impressed by them. I mean, I'm a Spalding graduate, so I'm extremely biased. But
and I'm a Nashua High grad, so this is fighting words, Justin.
I know. I was very impressed by. I can't remember his first name, so I apologize. The kid Choate from South, number 30.
Stephen Choate. Yeah, Stephen Choate.
Yeah, he was very explosive. He ran the kickback 90 yards. He had a really nice. I think it was a 45-yard reception right before halftime, which allowed the South to take the lead. He was very impressive. It looked like Trevor Knight. You had said it, Pete, when I bugged you for a scouting report. Trevor Knight does look like he's matured. So.
Yeah, he's a good quarterback. He actually, there's I don't want to say some controversy there, but his dad is Scott Knight from Nashua South.
Yeah.
They're from Amherst, so he could be the South. He can quarterback right now. He could.
That's like a Jordan Bean pitching for St. Thomas situation when he's from Portsmouth.
Exactly.
But I did want to say, I think the game of the year in Division II is going to be Bedford against Spalding on October 26th. That can have some playoff implications because it seems like Division II is pretty good all around this year. And I think that'll be the game to watch.
Hey, Justin, you're going to take the road trip out to Keene. I don't know if they're even playing at Keene this year, but that has got to be the worst road trip of all of New Hampshire high school football. Spalding against Keene.
I broadcasted a game. Somersworth went to Stevens last year. That's in Claremont. I put that road trip against the one to keep. I'm just telling you right now.
A lot of fun. Justin, appreciate the phone call, buddy.
Hey, keep up the good work, you guys. Love the show.
All right, thank you. Justin McIsaac out there in Rochester does his own radio show, and someone on this show might be a guest on his show later on this morning.
All right, well, like cross promotion.
You.
No, it's not me. I've got to hustle out of here.
John Kesty, is it you? Are you appearing? No.
Is it Kayla?
No, Kayla, are you doing some moonlighting?
You know I am.
The authority on New Hampshire high school football. I would give the number out, but I'm afraid who's going to call next. 645-6161. That's 645-6161. If you were at a game last night or you headed to a game today, we'd love to hear from you and talk about the start of another New Hampshire high school football season. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the show heading up towards 9 o'clock. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler of the New Hampshire Union Leader, the New Hampshire Sunday News. Look for his 1st and 10 column on Sunday. That's one of the things that I like most about that Sunday paper, sitting in my driveway on Sunday morning, providing it's not wet.
Yeah.
I know you have nothing to do with the distribution, but sometimes when the paper arrives and there's forecast of rain, might be a good idea, like they do at the supermarket, to double bag that bad boy, because I've gotten my paper wet more than one time.
We can put it in the suggestion box.
That's right. We will do that, and I look forward to that 1st and 10 column on Sundays when it comes out here, and about everything that happened around the state of New Hampshire high school football, and you can hear about it each and every Saturday for 2 hours, 7 to 9, right here, WGIR, AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Welcome back to the best local coverage of New Hampshire high school football on the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
We're wrapping up the program on this, the first week of official play in New Hampshire high school football. Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler, WGIR AM 610 in the Manchester area, also 96.7 The Wave out on the New Hampshire Seacoast, and online, wherever you are, nhsportspage.com, the video cast of the radio show, and we have it posted up on nhsportspage.com each and every Saturday. I don't know when this one's going to be up, because we're going to be taking the ride out to Derry for that BG Pinkerton game this afternoon, so we'll get to it. John Kesty, our video guy, has got a lot of work to do over the next 24 hours or so. We got it easy, Mark.
Yeah.
You know, we can go to the game,
talk.
write a quick story, we can talk, but this guy's got to do all the work. I want to talk about the Union Leader WGIR WMUR High School Football Power Poll, which came out last week. The new poll will be out, I think, Monday or Tuesday this week. Monday. I don't know about the holiday situation and all that, but it'll be coming out Monday. I'm sure you will have it first on your website, NewHampshireGameDay.com. Spell it out, NewHampshireGameDay.com. The Power Poll came out. You had Exeter 1, Pinkerton 2, Manchester Central number 3. Pinkerton hasn't played yet. Exeter impressive last night, beating Dover. Central impressive last night, shutting out Timberlane. I don't see anybody moving in the top 3 spots if Pinkerton's able to beat BG this afternoon.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I in my personal ballot, I had Central at number 2 in the preseason and Pinkerton 3, both behind Exeter. Yeah, it'll depend on how maybe the result of today's game, Pinkerton BG certainly, but if Pinkerton wins, maybe you have to take into consideration, for me anyway, my ballot, maybe I'd have to take into consideration how dominant the victory if I were to move them up in my own ballot, because again, I did have Central at 2.
You take stuff like that. I mean, this team blows out this team, I'm going to rate them up a little bit more. It's sort of like that college football poll.
Yeah, not typically. Almost never. I can't really imagine a time when I did. I think if all teams win, they for the most part they stay they stay in the same slot on the ballot until you get later into the year. Right now, it's still pretty easy because some teams have played one game because of last night. Others still have yet to play. It's not really until you get midway and into the later part of the season where Team A beat Team B and Team C beat, things start to get a little muddied. And then you have to take into consideration how much did this win impress versus another team's win. But right now where things are still, it's a clean slate. If you win, you typically don't move on my ballot.
Is it safe for me to assume that a couple of teams are moving on out of the poll? Dover, who was ranked number 6 in the preseason poll, I didn't even have on my ballot. So other voters who were in on this thing, obviously thought a lot more of the Green Wave than I did. They're going to be out of the poll, I bet. And Salem, they were tied for 9th with Keene and then they played Keene and lost 62-27. Their stay in the preseason power poll is short-lived.
Yeah, I haven't given a ton of thought to it yet, but I would say when I sit down to map out my top 10 for next week, Salem would probably be out because I think they were on the bottom end of my poll. For me, Dover, I don't know that I would move them out completely because I had them, I think, at 5 or 6. I don't have my ballot in front of me, so forgive me. But I think I had the middle of the pack on my preseason ballot. They played the number 1 team in the state. Yeah, they got blown out, but it's the number 1 team in the state, and it's the defending Division I champion. And also, you can take it for what it's worth that it's a non-league game. The big thing that I've applied in the past, too, is that we're only ranking 10 teams. So a big drop to me in the poll is moving 2 or 3 slots down. Same as moving 2 or 3 slots up. It's not like you get blown out and you're the number 4 team, so now you're automatically out of the poll. I understand some voters apply that logic, and that's fine. But for me, it's a pretty big drop to move 3 or 4 slots. So if I had them at 5 or 6, maybe they're down toward the end, but not quite out yet. Again, taking into consideration that it was a non-league game and they played the number 1 team in the state. And
when you said we're only ranking 10 teams, does that mean you wish that the power poll was involving more teams?
No, it's perfect at 10. There's 56 teams this year playing New Hampshire high school football at the varsity level. 10 is perfect. That's been a criticism in the past of the polls that we should be ranking more teams to include more. But to me, it's a special thing to get a ranking to be recognized as one of the top 10 teams in the state. 10 is fine. For the number of teams that play football in this state, 10 is perfect. So, no, I wasn't suggesting that we have more teams.
For a guy who supposedly knows his high school football, who dropped out? Was it Fall Mountain that dropped their football program?
Yep.
Because it was 57.
Yes, it was 57. So Division 5 is a 9-team league. It used to be, or it had been, 9 teams across the top 3 divisions, 1, 2, and 3, and then divisions 4, 5, and 6 had 10 teams apiece. But without Fall Mountain, Division 5, that's a 9-team league.
So Fall Mountain has fallen out of it.
Correct.
As far as football goes.
At least for this year. Now maybe they can get. I think it's a numbers thing. I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's a numbers thing. So if they can rebound and get the participation level up again, maybe they come back.
And here's just a quick Schneid comment as we have our final minute left to go.
Okay.
It seems like everybody's got a power poll now.
Yeah, they do. I guess my philosophy on it is imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, because me and you have been voters in there's, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one poll, and people can take shots at me if they want for that, but there's only one poll. It's the statewide poll. We have the 3 statewide media outlets doing it. We've been charter voters from the beginning, and everybody else that's doing polls, or some of them really identical as I see it, it's just imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. That's how I
Very
look at
well
it.
put. Hey, I want to thank our guests who joined us, Bill Ball from Exeter, Brian O'Reilly from Pinkerton, and John Doyle from Fosters.com. For our friend John Kesty on the camera for NHSportsPage.com, our producer Kayla Windsor, and Mark Taylor from the Union Leader, my name's Pete Terrier. Have a good weekend, everybody.